Welcome back to Hobby Jogger Elite, and welcome to my 2024 Chicago Marathon race experience recap. If you would have asked me, crossing the finish line in the day following, if I wanted to even run through this video, given, the result of my Chicago Marathon race itself, I would not have been interested in doing this. But in this channel and my goal with this, ultimately, I want to document all the highs and the lows of what it is like to chase after these big goals and pursue everything that comes along with marathon training and racing. All the good things, the bad things, the very non-linear progress that, happens at some time. So I think that's important, and it's a good way to sort of process everything as well. And ultimately, I want these videos not only to be some sort of documentation of my training, of my progress, of my racing, of my running in general, but also a help to the people that watch these videos so that maybe you can take something away from it. So I not only want to talk about the race, but I also want to talk about sort of the weekend, because as this is a world marathon major, this is not just like simply showing up to a local race the morning of, running it, and going home. There's a travel aspect, there's just like a cultural shift. There are a lot of adjustments you have to make. There are, expenses and a whole myriad of things that you run into when it comes to not only traveling halfway across the country, but traveling a long way to a world marathon major. So as a first-time world marathon major runner, just want to talk about the experience as a whole. We were lucky enough to be able to head out on a Friday, so that meant I at least had the whole entire day before the marathon to sort of rest up, relax, carb up, all that good stuff, instead of landing on the day before and sort of having to rush to the expo to pick up my bib, pick up my registration, all that stuff, rush back, try to recover all in one day. Had that extra day there. So we were heading out on Friday. Flight immediately gets delayed. We were traveling via the trains and the metro system and all of that. So it was very straightforward. And if I were to recommend a way of getting around Chicago to anybody who will be running the Chicago Marathon in the future, granted, you don't live right in Chicago or right out of Chicago. You can't drive around in your own car, or you can't have somebody just drop you off right in front of the door to somewhere, right in front of the race itself on race morning. I would recommend traveling via those trains. Landed at the O'Hara Airport. We ended up flying out of Midway, but landed there in O'Hara. Solid airport, got through that fine. Quite a bit of walking as an introduction to Chicago, which was a theme of pretty much all the pre-race festivities and just getting around Chicago in general. As a non-Chicago resident, you're gonna have to walk a lot. Even on a travel day where all I really did was fly in and hang out, 2 days before the race, I still had 25,000 steps. And that was me trying not to be on my feet the whole entire day. So plan was to make a quick stop at the Airbnb, settled a little bit, make sure I was staying on top of my carb loading.
All right, we're in our Airbnb. Connor, how you feeling?
Full.
How many bagels have you ate so far?
4.
4.
So cool. I want to be a normal boy again.
Oh.
Only 200 grams of carbs to go. It's 3 more bagels. 4 more bagels.
I want to wish Connor luck.
Yay, Connor!
Yay, Connor.
2 more days.
2 days. We're going to go eat pizza tonight.
And then made the trek over to the Expo Center, which seems to be the thing in Chicago and within the universe of the Chicago Marathon weekend experience as a whole, that is the most out of the way. So that sort of took the longest to get to and get back. That was the rest of the day from the time we got there around what I would say was mid-afternoon. But the Expo Center, very cool. I must say though, I'm, again, sort of a theme of this is I'm very used to just small local races. So the sheer amount of people, the amount of tents and vendors set up in the expo itself, it just was I wouldn't say overwhelming. It was just a lot. It was just a lot to be confronted with. It felt like you were walking into the World's Fair. Again, you could, if you're somebody who likes to mosey around, walk around, just see stuff, people watch, shop a little bit. Everything was there that you could possibly need if you forgot to pack it for this Chicago Marathon weekend. So that is a comfort in itself. But, you know, I'm not a big like look around, shop, mosey around. I'm typically like walking as fast as I can to whatever I need to get, getting the thing and getting out of there. A bit of an introvert, I guess I would say. Nothing against the Marathon Expo in itself. Again, very well organized, well put together. Getting through it was a breeze, but the sheer amount of people there were a lot. So we got out of there as quick as possible and went to an amazing pizza place then for dinner afterwards.
All right, we just ate. We ate our food.
It was nice to finally have something that wasn't just like boxed minute rice or bagels to add to those carbs. And yeah, cannot recommend that restaurant enough. Pizza was great. The chicken parm was great. The pasta was great. So that then led to the day before the Chicago Marathon. The weather had turned a little bit. It was pretty warm on the Friday that we got in, but it started to cool down a little bit. Not crazy. It was still in like the low 60-degree Fahrenheit range there, and went out for my shakeout run. Shakeout, just about complete. May have gotten a little lost, but that's just how it goes sometimes. We are out here in Chicago, getting lost. Beautiful city though. And I just ended up running loops around a park that was about half a mile from our Airbnb, then ran back. I've heard people talk about, you know, you want to avoid certain parts of the city. You know, we were all over the place. We flew in at O'Hara and flew out at Midway. So we sort of covered quite a bit of the city in just traveling around and everything. Felt great at all parts of it, and everything felt great. The shakeout run, you know, it was wonderful to see the city that morning. People there were lovely. So Chicago, very solid city.
So where we meet him? What'd you eat for dinner tonight?
Rice.
Chicken.
And yeah, the rest of the day really just laid around, watched some college football. My family went out to sort of see some stuff, see some sights, all that good stuff. Chicago, there's a lot to see, a lot to experience with different tours, architecture tours, you know, interesting places to visit. I wish I would have did a little bit more of that. If you would have told me the time I would have ran at the beginning of the trip and then given me the option to either take it super easy the day before, do absolutely nothing, lay on the couch all day, eat carbs, all that good stuff, or experience the city a little bit more as if it was an actual like full-fledged trip, I probably would have experienced the city a little more. If you would have just told me though what the first 20 miles of the race was, I would have done exactly what I did, and that was take it easy, because I was very happy the next day with how the race was going for the majority of it, but we won't get ahead of ourselves here. Still a good day to sort of relax, very usual day before marathon experience. Same exact plan that I followed last year that ended up being very successful, so sort of stuck to it. Everything was great that day. Got to bed pretty early then before the next day. I think I ended up going to bed like right at 8 p.m. and it was a solid night's sleep.
All right, Connor, it's race day. What time is it? 4:32.
It was going to take a little bit the next morning to get to the train and then get on the train and get all the way to where I needed to get in order to get to Grant Park, get through my gate, and essentially get to the race itself. So I had the same sort of breakfast that I always have, either like a couple slices of white bread or a white bagel with some peanut butter and some honey. Had that as soon as I woke up, took in some Tailwind, topped off all the carb reserves. And as soon as we started going on the train, it wasn't a sense of like nervousness when it came to the stomach stuff I was feeling, and I wouldn't even call it like stomach pain. It was this like very low humming feeling of uneasiness, I guess I would say. I wouldn't say at this point I was quite nauseous. I just felt uneasy, not even like I had to go to the bathroom uneasy, just things felt like slightly out of sorts. Beyond that, it was pretty seamless getting there. And obviously, if you're traveling from out of town, which I would say the majority of people who run this race are, I would say the most affordable, sensible thing is to just get a train card and ride that. And I arrive at my gate, my corral, right after 5:30. It's like 5:40-ish. Found a porta potty. There weren't lines when I got there at all. So if I wanted to go 1, 2, 3 times, which I did, it was totally a breeze. No waiting, nothing. It was very easy, accessible. I had watched a lot of like Chicago Marathon tips and tricks before we traveled to Chicago for the weekend, and a lot of people, and the thing I was most worried about was around this issue of not being able to bring in like previously mixed drinks in a handheld or whatever, because I always carry a handheld. I carry that Scratch Super High Carb in there. It has always worked really well for me, and I was afraid that, taking that in, they would make me pour it out and then I would be without it. So brought travel size Scratch packets and a separately already like sealed plastic water bottle that I could then unseal and fill my handheld up with. That all went perfectly. Went in there, wasn't very cold. I would say it was already like 61, 62 degrees when I arrived. So all the like winter tearaway layers that I would donate felt pretty warm. And yeah, I just hung out outside of my corral for quite a bit of time. About an hour before the race started, I went into the corral, sort of sat on a curb and just hung out there, talked with some people who were in my corral, saw a couple people both in and outside the corral who were familiar with the channel. It was awesome to meet some of you and talk to you. It was just, a nice touch to the whole weekend. People are so nice. You all are so nice and supportive. So we then finally around 7:30 got started with the race. Obviously the elites went off first, which my fiance was kind enough to get some awesome footage of a lot of the marathoners I've been following and looking up to for quite some time in this sport. We're just racing right by them. I was kind of jealous. They were like within feet of them. Absolutely crazy. And then obviously Corral A went, and then Corral B. Now I'll talk about my race experience itself, which I didn't bring a camera with me. I didn't record anything. Again, my family was nice enough to get some footage of me when they were able to see me out there on the course. Yeah, it is as crowded as advertised. It was like bumper to bumper traffic for the first 5K, I would say. Like, I didn't have a ton of breathing room. It was pretty dicey trying to pass people if they weren't going at the same pace as you. And luckily enough for me, despite looking at some of the GPS charts and the sort of the imaging of the race itself, some of the lines are a little bit jagged and curvy, but I came through 1 mile not even noticing where the 1 mile mark was, because I was so like caught up in how hectic the race itself was. Not hectic in a bad way, just like so many people, the crowds going absolutely nuts.
No, that's not him. I thought it was.
Totally missed the 1 mile mark. I was like, I wonder when I'm gonna get to that first mile. And I looked at my watch, changed the screen back to the distance screen, and I was already at about 3K, 1.8 miles, when I thought I was only through 1 mile. So you really get swept up in all of that energy. And I must say the Stride pods did an absolutely amazing job, because when I manual split at the 2 mile mark that I reached, I was at like 2.01 on my watch via the Stride tracking. And it pretty much remained that way through the majority of the race. All the high rises, all the advertised GPS issues with going under the tunnels and the underpasses and all that stuff, it was absolutely perfect. I could have left my auto lap on essentially, and I would have been totally fine. If you would have asked me how the race was going, not only through those first couple miles, but through a lot of it in general, like, it was going so amazingly. I saw my family, my fiance, pretty early on. It was great to get some support from them. The crowd support in general was absolutely electric. I would say it definitely didn't create like anxiousness in me at times, or like a feeling of being overwhelmed. It was just generally like a lot of things that I was not used to, because again, before this, the biggest marathon in terms of crowd support, like there would be smatterings of people here and there. The biggest marathon field I've ever raced in, like maybe 500 or 600 people. So this was just like epic proportions compared to what I'm used to. I definitely appreciate it, and I think I would have appreciated later in the race even more if I had the race day that I wanted. But through the first 75% of the race, I was feeling great, and I was having what I thought was the race of my life. And with the race plan that I had talked about and all the training I had done, I was like right on the mark with essentially everything. Through halfway, I was pretty much clicking off like the same mile splits throughout.
Oh God, I'm so stressed.
There he is. You got this, Connor!
Mile 1 sort of eased in the way I wanted to. I was around, I think, 6:35 pace. Mile 2 through halfway, I was essentially between like 6:23 or 6:24 and 6:27. Like I was just on the dot every single mile, and I came through half 1:24:33. So pretty much exactly what I wanted to come through in. Obviously with that, that's like a projected finish if you are to stay on the exact pace of like 2:49. And that is an overall pace through the half of 6:27 per mile. So I really settled into the rhythm that I wanted to for the first half. Mission accomplished there. And that continued through the first 17 miles or so, where I was just kind of right where I wanted to be. My family said they were taking a look at like my projected finish time, and they said I was projected for like a 2:48 finish after they saw me. So things were looking great. Those stomach issues, that general like feeling of uneasiness that I felt before the race stuck with me. Even through that first half where I was feeling amazing just in terms of my running, my stomach was just not happy, was upset, and I have no idea why up until this point. I don't know if it was like a fatigue thing with the same gels I've been using for well over a year now, that same like flavor of lemon lime for both my hydration and my gels. Like if it was a little bit of anxious energy from the race and the event itself, from the travel, from everything combined, like a little bit of all of it, I still don't know. I can't pinpoint what it was. But those stomach issues essentially led me to the point where in my mind I was like, if I have to taste these lemon lime gels again, I'm going to puke. You know, I was able to stomach them a little bit more. I had had one right before the race, one at mile 2, mile 6, mile 10, and 14. By the time I had to take another one, because I was trying to take one every 4 miles or so, around like mile 17 or 18, I just couldn't do it. I started to lean a little bit more on my handheld hydration, which I successfully got at halfway. And even that, like I just couldn't even stomach that. And I think like my either subconscious or conscious avoidance of taking all of that in just had a bit of a chain reaction with like, I wasn't feeling the best. I started to get some abdominal muscle cramps, like not even like side stitches at first. I've never gotten those in the middle of a race. And those started to definitely have some effect on my running. Like I could definitely feel myself like disengaging a little bit, hunching over. Your gait is affected by all other parts of your body. Things just start to collapse when one thing collapses. So then my stride started to be adjusted by that. I started to get a little bit of a side stitch towards my hip. Next thing you know, I'm not able to pick my legs up quite as much. And by around like the 19-mile mark, I am starting to feel cramps, muscle cramps come up like crazy.
Oh, he's cramping. This doesn't look good.
They knew that something was wrong. I was very aware that something was wrong, but even at the like 18, 19, 20 mile mark, when I first started feeling actual muscle cramps in my legs, they were manageable. My pace definitely slipped a little bit, but it wasn't out of like, I can't keep this pace due to my like breathing or my fitness or whatever. It was more so, I don't want these cramps to get any worse, so I'm going to really intentionally slow down a little bit and see if we can just coast at a slightly lower intensity. And that worked up until the 20-mile mark. And even at the 20-mile mark, my average pace was still like 6:27, 6:28 after that point. So 10K to go, you figure that's your average pace. I thought, okay, just maintain this, keep moving forward, try not to think about it too much, just sort of do the marathon shuffle, keep it around like sub 7 pace or 7 flat pace, and maybe we can just get through this thing without collapsing entirely. I collapsed entirely. from then on, it just got worse. The worst muscle cramps I have ever experienced, paired with the worst stomach issues I've ever had in the middle of the race. And that really started to happen towards like the 24 mile mark. And I thought I could get away with it, just like keep going, keep jogging ahead at the very least, but I just couldn't. I came to multiple complete stops. The first one being just beyond 23.5 miles, where I was just bent over watching my quad muscles just collapsing in on themselves, being tugged in different directions. Every time I would like settle a quad cramp and bend over the wrong way, my hamstring would cramp up, and it was just like this seesaw back and forth of like the worst quad cramp I've ever had, the worst hamstring cramp I've ever had. And I just could not get them under control, and they would subside after a couple minutes and I would continue to move. I think I continued to run after that first complete stop for around like 6 or 7 minutes, and I thought they were good, and then they came up again. And I ended up having to come to a complete stop 5 total times between the 23.5 mile mark and the 25.5 mile mark. And I thought I would have to again on the way to the finish line with like 400 meters to go, but just sort of like hobbled through it. I didn't even look like I was running at that point, and it was just such an incredible struggle. Like, I can't imagine a ton of people were tracking me on the app, but I know my parents were, I know my fiance was, a few people commented and said they were. And for me to get from 35K to 40K took me about 35 minutes. So I went from just clicking off like 20-minute flat 5Ks to taking 35 minutes to go 5K. And then just to go that last 2K from 40K to 42K took me another 20 minutes. So like when it got bad, it all got bad. When it rained, it poured. And some of the cramps were finally letting up because the intensity had just lowered so incredibly much as I crossed the finish line. That insult to injury, if you're familiar with the Chicago Marathon, for you to get from the finish line to like your family reunion area at the end is like, it feels like another like 2 miles of walking. I just like hobbled through there, felt like I was doing the walk of shame. And just as I found them, I started to cramp up more and laid on the ground.
Connor, want to say some words about Chicago?
Not great.
Not great.
That hurt. I finished.
He finished.
That is all that can be said. That was a lot. Great race.
How do you feel about big city marathons?
Overstimulated.
Overstimulated. Any last words?
Let's go Eagles.
But again, through the first like 75-80% of the race, I thought I was having the marathon of my life because I was having the marathon of my life. I was executing things exactly how I wanted to. I was clicking off the exact paces that I wanted to. It felt like I was totally capable of what I was doing in the moment. My fitness was there, but everything else in my body did not want to see that happen. When it came to the stomach pains, when it came to my taste for the nutrition and fueling plan that I had been practicing for so incredibly long, like everything just kind of went wrong at once, which kind of makes it much more frustrating. I would have rather have burnt out because I just couldn't hold the pace due to fitness. If like cramps and stomach issues and all this GI distress that I had, that would have been out of the picture, and it would have just been like a humbling experience to say you went out too fast, you could not hold that pace, and you slowed down because of it. I can accept that a little bit better. When it's something like GI distress and stomach issues and not being able to take in gels and the nutrition that I had been practicing for months and months on end, like I just don't have a ton of answers for why this actually happened. I don't know why I woke up feeling uneasy. I don't know why it persisted through the race. I was not able to have the day that I wanted, and it sucks. It sucks a ton because it was a great weekend. We went out afterward, watched some football. The Eagles were disappointing, but they still won.
What'd you have to eat?
I had a breakfast burrito before I had to make several trips to the little boys' room.
Here I am, a couple days afterward, I'm just kind of left feeling like things feel just inconclusive after this race. I'm happy to have raced my first world major, but it's just not what I envisioned, even up to that 20-mile mark. I thought things were going to go a lot better in that last 10K, but again, everything came crashing down at once. So I don't have a ton of answers right now. Definitely going to change up some of the fueling, maybe make it even more simple, try some new products. I see that time, and that's just like not the runner I am at this point. Like, I ran ultimately with the finish time faster on my first ever marathon than I did on my 5th marathon on a world record course, with the most crowd support I've ever had, with the most people to go with than I've ever had. Like, it just was not my day. I don't know what I'm gonna do from here. Don't want to completely abandon the fitness that I had, because I do still feel like I am in the best shape of my life. The marathon doesn't owe you anything. It humbles us very often. It just feels like, you put so incredibly much into marathon training leading up to that race day. For that one race to be so consequential feels fulfilling when everything goes the way you want it to go and goes as planned. When it doesn't, it feels like, man, I wish I could have another shot at it. So I'm gonna see how I recover here. Maybe sometime in November, I'll see if I can ramp things up here, like safely, conservatively, and see if the fitness is still there. And maybe I'll hop into another marathon. But if I don't recover quickly, I don't want to put myself in jeopardy of, getting injured or anything like that. I'm also getting married in the beginning of December, so I don't want to pull too much focus from my own perspective and my family's and my fiance's away from that event that is coming up as well. But yeah, it's just, Chicago, brilliant marathon. Everything was great about the environment itself. It's just something literally inside of me was completely off that day, and I feel perfectly fine now. So I can't even say like, oh, I picked up a stomach bug. That's pretty much all I have to say. To add insult to injury, our flight got canceled returning here to Philly, and then it got delayed multiple hours, but we got back home. We're relaxing now. We're good to go. And, we're just moving forward. Happy that I was able, and grateful that I was able to race the Chicago Marathon this year, to share the course with the new women's world record holder, to be out there with all of you that raced the Chicago Marathon, to have finally met some people who are, in this very small Hobby Jogger Elite community in person. You were all incredibly supportive and nice, and it was a great, great day. Regardless of the result that came about. So stay tuned for what we'll be doing here in the near future. Maybe a whole lot of nothing, but maybe a whole lot of something. So we will see. But for now, that is everything. I'm done yapping, and hopefully we will catch up soon then. Peace.